Welcome everyone back to a new edition of Cat's Eye on the Future. We've been having a lot of electrical storms with power and phone outages here in Ireland the past couple of weeks, which is why the past week's show was a repeat of the Yule interview with Kveldoffer Gunderson. Now, we're hoping to bring him back sometime in January and he can continue on this wonderful topic and others. But for this week, the storms were nice enough to leave power on at my house. So even though a lot of people here are not able to get online, we've been able to. So we're going to take a sneak peek at the major energy themes of 2014 for this show. Now, this coming show isn't an exhaustive list of individual predictions. Lots of people do that, and what I'm really doing there more, though, is just an overview of the strongest energies, the most likely really overall themes that are going to influence current affairs and international news in this coming year. So let's take a seat in our virtual reading room where the fire is always burning in the hearth, the chair is always comfortable, and the tea is just how you like it. And we'll be back for the reading right after these short messages. All the music used on the show today is from musicalley.com, your source for free-to-air music for podcasts. The artists place their music up for free to air in hopes that you, the listener, will visit their site and purchase some of their outstanding musical offerings. So after the show, why not visit musicalley.com and explore their extensive playlist?
And she sings, she goes home in the evening with the dew all on her wings.
Have questions? The cards have answers. If you would like a personal reading with Melody, just go to my website, melodipsychicreadings.com. That's Melody with an I, psychicreadings.com for information, or email me at melodyreader@gmail.com. Readings are available using Skype, phone, email, or even in person if you are lucky to live in Ireland. Why not find out what special messages the cards have just for you and book a private reading today?
And see me from beneath the sea, the best in all of Ireland. See me from beneath the sea, the best in all of Ireland.
Now, what are the most important trends, energies, or events the cards and the runes would like to bring to our attention for the year 2014? First off, the primary card for this reading literally kind of jumped out of the deck while I was shuffling. Now this means that instead of just going with the flow with the rest of the cards and I pick one out when I feel like it's time to stop, this card leaps out of the deck and into my hand face up. Because of this, I think that the Scales card, which is similar to standard tarot deck judgment card, is probably the major energy theme for this year. Now, just what does that imply? Well, it kind of means that this is likely to be a year when many issues are sort of weighed in the balance, and some of them are likely to tip over one way or another. It also suggests a year when legal issues, laws, courts, and man-made issues are likely to be more important, and also a year when various karmic situations from the past are likely to cycle up and either repeat themselves or present themselves to be dealt with once again. There's an old saying that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme, and this may be a major piece of wisdom to remember during this time period. Now, this is not to say there will be no natural disasters or anything that's not man-made or man-created that's a big issue this year. What it does mean is that the primary big energy push, though, is going to be on human-created and human-caused problems. Now, the next card, or perhaps what we might call the first card of the full reading, would be the Peace card. The Peace card on its own is a lovely cathedral with sun streaming through the stained glass windows. It's a very quiet card. It's usually sort of similarly joyful, but, in a really kind of low-key way. It's got hints of the church sanctuary, but it's a place of refuge and retreat, a place of safety. It's an absence of conflict also, of course. Now, being next to the scales card and right seemingly directed by it, I have to wonder if the peace card may be one of the issues that the scales are weighing and trying to keep in balance this year. Thankfully, the warrior card, that card with the guy on it with an armor, is nowhere in this reading. So an actual breakout of, say, something like World War III is unlikely, as opposed to, say, minor conflicts, which on an international scale go on all the time. But this year, even though that major conflict itself may not come to blows, this could be a year when such things are starting to be decided or even determined one way or another. Whether we go forward in peace or not, it may be a major, major theme. And they are likely to be decided and sorted in regards to unions and alliances of all types, because the union card is right next to the peace card. So you have this kind of, togetherness of, the scales card at the top, the peace card, and then the union card. Now, the union card is the lover's card in a regular deck. This card is also about all sorts of human partnerships, not just romantic ones. But in an international reading, I've noticed it tends to either be actually about like labor management relations, union issues, which I think is going to be a big theme this year. We already saw it as a growing sort of thing towards the end of 2013, and I think that's going to continue. But the union card also tends to flag nations, groups of nations, and other entities that either currently have the words union or united in their name, or perhaps are made up of a group like an empire. Those would obviously include places like the United States, the European Union, the former Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, in other words, Russia. You could even get things like corporations with unions in their name. It's not just about nations. It's like Union Carbide, for example, or even sports teams like Manchester United. They anything with that sort of name is likely to be targeted here. And a little bit more distantly, or possibly one step off, would be places that seem more like an empire, like China, with its many different ethnic groups, for example. Though this may be stretching things a bit, but I don't think it's too much. I think that they're also flagged in this energy. There may be great issues of peace and union going on this year, with a lot of tension, interestingly enough, in both directions. You're going to see pressure both to increase some unifications, but also strong energies working to push established unions apart. This is going to have particular repercussions, I think, for both the EU and the United States. It doesn't mean that either of these entities is going to break up, but there may be a lot of pressures in that direction, as well as counter pressures that result in more expansion or proposed expansions. This sounds like a contradiction, but it really isn't. Because in the case of the EU, for example, I can easily see pressures from, say, former Soviet bloc border states in Europe who want to join the Union, the EU, and make it larger, maybe push that forward. Whereas at the same time, you might get some pressure from other parts of the EU, the UK, for example, or Southern Europe, who may wish to leave the Union or wish to see it dissolved. There have been even hints that parts of Germany, there's a certain amount of energy towards that. So you get these two things at the same time. I also think in the US, you're going to see a lot more of the tension between state and federal governments. You may see also places like Puerto Rico or parts of existing states of the U.S. wanting to vote for statehood, which would increase the number of states, at the same time that you see this push towards states wanting to draw back, getting back some of their autonomy, and in some rare cases, perhaps even like succession movements and things like that. So again, this cross-culture current that's really sort of battling it out with, I think, the EU and the United States as some of the major grounds. They won't be the only places affected, but I think that that's a major energy thing. This push-pull towards and away from unity worldwide could easily result in the birth of new national identities or new movements also, ideas and situations. The birth card comes right after the union card, and once again repeats the theme I talked about with the peace and scales of situations that start this year, that are given birth to this year, but they may not finish during the current time period. Of course, the birth card may go way beyond a few new seats at the United Nations, or even, states in Brussels, or Washington. You have new memes, I think, going on. They're going to come out for like the internet. You're going to see but you're also going to see a whole cultural flirtation with the new, the exciting, the promising, the novel. There are times when world energies or cultural energies, particularly in the West, are more conservative and people take comfort in the old ways of doing things. In fact, I think we've just been through one of these periods where particularly when the big recession hit, that people, that was their immediate thought was to, like, how did our grandparents do things, relearning new skills, reviving old ideas. That's all been very popular. But I don't think this year that's going to continue to the same degree. I think that trend won't stop altogether, but rather we're going to start looking, in the West in particular, for people to become tired of restraint, tired of having to conserve everything or be cautious, and they're just tired of having to be careful and everything kind of being gray and miserable, and instead they're really ready to embrace new things that seem modern, things that seem like a great new idea or the next best and brightest glitzy thing. Now, some of this energy, which I point out also occurred in the 1930s after the certain point in that Great Depression, because eventually people are just going to have a bounce back. So again, some of this energy is likely to result in some wildly positive things, like solutions to problems that may have seemed impossible to solve. I think these may also result in some, like, unexpected peace treaties or union agreements, some interesting solutions to things that we just didn't think possible. There will also be some new innovations, I think, particularly in the workplace. Some of this will be bad, some of this will be good from a union perspective, in terms that I think you're going to see, like, more mechanization, and but you're also going to see some new breakthroughs in science, medical fields. And especially, I think there's going to be breakthroughs in communication and entertainment. They're going to make a lot of people feel like we're in the world of science fiction and it's finally here. Again, that started already in 2013, but I think you're going to see it even more on a macro scale with things like maybe space tourism, but on a more personal level with just the continuation of things like ever amazing smartphones and computers and interactive TV, that kind of stuff. And it could be very distracting in some ways too, but I think it'll be kind of exciting and fun and interesting for a lot of people. However, the birth card also sits between the union card on one side and back to our cat's eye tarot, the cat's eye wheel of fortune on the other. Now, in my kitty tarot deck, this wheel of fortune card is shown as happy barn cats. They're jumping off the old wagon wheel because they've just spied some very tasty mice under the wagon. The mice have no idea they may be about to become lunch or that anything has changed. This is great because this card tends to indicate times of changes, fate, and cycles, and often ones that come up and sneak up on us that we're not aware. And this is exactly what I think is happening here. Getting back to the scales card, this time when the karmic wheel turns around again, and once it starts rolling, the fate of the mice and the situations affected, it's more or less kind of sealed. So it's fate in the sense that you can't escape fate, but up until that point, the mice could have run away, but they weren't looking to see what was happening. They didn't realize things had shifted. And I think this whole year is going to be sort of like that it's going to be like, it won't be in reality that one day we're one place and one day we're the next place. Things really actually are moving more slowly than that. But for a lot of people, on a lot of levels, this year is going to seem like things just change very suddenly. Now, this is why I mentioned the cycles of karma, history, fate earlier, because I do believe these two cards really tie together and produce both this year's climate of change. Hence the fascination with the modern, but also judgment going along with echoes of previous times in the past, when things seemed new and positive, but there were a lot of older issues seemingly swept under the rug in pursuit of it. And again, look at songs like Happy Days or Here Again coming out of the Depression. It's this human need to try to move forward, even though things haven't really quite been settled and solved from the past things going on. Now, next, the Wheel of Fortune, we have the very interesting figure of the King of Kitty Wands. Now, the King of Kitty Wands has been showing up in some of my regular blog readings, those of you who follow it. So this was a theme that's already starting in 2013, but it really, really gets big, I think, in 2014. The King of Kitty Wands is shown as a charismatic, of somewhat fiery orange tomcat, that the other kitties, they all look to him for leadership. And when he's a good cat, he's an inspiration to everyone and can lead his colony in all kinds of new and creative ways. But when he's not such a good cat, or person, or leader, he can use these same charismatic gifts to seem to be a solution to the problems of a people, a tribe, a nation, the barn cats, business, corporation, whatever, while actually using all this attention and this ability to achieve maybe his own motives, which could either be personal or sometimes they're political or on the behalf of a certain group of people or cats, but they're not necessarily really for the good of all. My sense is when I saw this card along with the others is that 2014 may be summed up partly as, quote, the year of the strong leader or leaders, unquote. You know, that's going to be a major theme that we'll review at the bottom. This is probably more than one person. One person may sort of bubble up to the top as a symbol of this growing energy, but I think this is the year when people and groups of people on all levels are likely to look to exciting, new, charismatic leaders, male or female, that seem to promise or actually do provide new solutions, answers, ideas, or ways forward and out of the current mess or situation that the particular group, individual, or nation finds themselves in. Again, this can be more than, this may appear to be a new solution, but like all things karmic and cyclic, it is going to be part of a repeated trend. When times become difficult, or perceived to be difficult, it is quite common that after a while, people start to look to strong leaders who appear to get it, to understand what's going on, and perhaps better than the average person, and who have the charisma to bring people happily to their point of view, and they can seem that they can solve things. Sometimes the results can be quite positive, at least in the long run, even though sometimes they're difficult at the time, such as the movement that led to the founding of the modern States of America, and the leaders pushing it into being. That was not fun while it was going on. It was a horrific civil war. But just a few years later, similar energies and individuals pushed that same sort of energy, but instead of a founding of a new republic that actually grew into the United States, what you get is the French Revolution, and ultimately the guillotine, and events that way down the road, you get Napoleon, again, this big charismatic leader who seems to provide an answer and an end to chaos, which has just gone on, and then he forms this new empire. It's more complex than that, but this is kind of, like I said, sometimes it's a really positive outcome, and it isn't always even dependent on the goodwill of the person. The times and other things going on as well also interfere. So there are both good things and bad things. This energy on its own is neither positive or negative. It just sort of is. Now, in the long run, if you read the literature of the time from the French Revolution, you'll see a rise in the idea of the modern, the new, the exciting, the desire on the part of people to improve things and recreate them was very, very strong. Again, they didn't have a bad goal. It just kind of didn't act out the way they expected. So those ideas in themselves aren't bad. In fact, they can be extremely positive. But when they combine with the desire for strong leaders, well, sometimes it works out well, and sometimes it doesn't. As I've said before, I don't think this meme is just about one leader in particular. I think this is about a trend we are likely to see, again, on all levels of society and throughout the world, for strong leaders, strong individuals, to start playing a really serious role this year, and more importantly, to be actively sought out by many. I think you are going to see a certain amount of looking for gurus as well, a certain amount of people looking for the individual who has the answer. But mostly, rather than religious revivals, I think our bright and fiery tomcats of wands are likely to be mostly political leaders, along with some highly influential folks in other fields like corporations, business, science, arts, entertainment, and very likely ideas as well. And that could be really positive as well. And there may be some religious leaders also that foam up to the top of the world's coffee cup during this year. But I suspect that those people who actually come to the international attention are likely to have some political association as well. On a personal level, again, there may be this tendency to sort of gravitate towards people or individuals who seem to provide some sort of spiritual answer. But I think really on a cultural and a worldwide theme, this is more political than legal than anything else. That's because the remaining two runes suggest that a big crisis is coming this year. Probably, again, in the world of politics, leadership, human laws and judgments, or, something to do again with people rather than a big crisis that comes because of disaster. Or if it is the result of a natural disaster, say like the earthquake in Japan that happened during a year that I thought was mostly going to be more human-based problems. The event, the earthquake, was natural, but the human-caused problem was actually the reactor and the atomic power plant that was there, and the inability to seemingly be able to stop the consequences of that. So again, if the crisis actually is spotted in a natural disaster, the outcome and a lot of the problems that are going to come out is going to be that human element. Now, the two runes that indicate this crisis are Nauthish, which signifies usually a time of desperation, a desperate need, and Tiwaj, which is the rune of judgment. In fact, it's very much like the scales card at the start of the reading. Another reason I really felt this was the overall energy. Now, Nauthish itself literally means the need fire. That's rubbing two sticks together, the most desperate and primitive way to start a fire if you need to keep warm. If people have a choice, they carry around matches. Even in the age when the runes were being discovered, people had carried around flints and steel. There were a lot of faster ways to start a fire. But if you're really stuck and you have nothing else and you're desperate, you can take two sticks and rub them together, and if you do it right, eventually you will get a spark. And it signifies a really desperate situation. And this could also, it could actually become something from fiery in nature, which is interesting when we go with our fiery tomcats. It could even be something like atomic or solar, because, once again, we just have a lot of fire here, and fire can also represent things like electricity and modern things, all of which, involve that spark. This rune is also our only really serious hint of what may be happening in terms of natural forces, which I touched on a minute ago. So far, all the cards and runes have mostly concentrated solely on human affairs rather than natural calamities or problems. But with Nauthish, you can get a suggestion of, again, volcanoes, fire, earthquake, fire, or out of control fires of some sort. This doesn't mean there will be no water damage anywhere in the world, or that there won't be any windstorms, hurricanes, blizzards, etc. But again, it just suggests that the greatest danger is from the elements of fire and things associated with it, from the heat within the earth to, again, that electrical grid. If there is a major world-affecting disaster this year, especially a, quote, natural one, unquote, as I said, or one made worse by nature, like what happened in Japan, I would look forward towards some form of fire as the cause. I mean, I would be looking for some form of fire as the cause. I wouldn't look forward to it, but I would be looking for that ultimately. Again, solar energy could be involved, the human splitting of atoms, something like that, but there seems to be one element most figured, and that is fire. Finally, with Tiwaj, we have the god Tyr, the original name of this rune. He's originally kind of a skyfather god, who later becomes a representative of justice and doing the right thing in Norse cosmology. It's Tyr who raises and feeds the magical wolf cub Fenris, who then grows to become so large that he's at risk of devouring the gods and the world is in danger. So the other gods come to Tyr and they tell him, look, you fed this creature, you created this problem, you deal with it. Which Tyr feels is only just and reasonable. He did create the problem. But he can't get the wolf to sit down and let him bind him, to put a rope on him. And the wolf says, Fenris says, before you get towards me with the rope, I want you to put your right hand, your sword hand, in my mouth, and that way you're at risk, and that way you'll have to keep your promise to take the rope off when you're done putting the rope on. And Tyr is forced into a situation where if he doesn't lie, the worlds and the gods can be destroyed. So he goes ahead and he lies and tells the wolf Fenris that he's not going to take the rope off. He puts the rope off, and then he says, take my hand, basically. He lets the wolf bite off his sword hand, because that's the just thing to do. And the wolf does that, and the wolf stays bound, the world is saved, and Tyr is without a sword hand, so he's the one-handed god. So while Tiwaj rune is about justice, it isn't just about the modern idea of justice, or law courts, or police, etc. I mean, this is the perfect rune, and many soldiers, judges, lawyers, policemen who are fond of runes or the Norse gods wear it as sort of a personal symbol. But it's also the older justice of the clan, or the payment of weregild, where you settle something, where you pay the price. Or even trial by combat, like what they call the holmganger, where two people came and fought it out, and the winner is judged to be the winner. The other one may be dead or severely injured. And you could also start a clan war, but technically it's supposed to end the problem. But again, it's this whole idea of tribal justice. It's also very often justice without a whole lot of mercy in it, as modern Westerners would understand it. But also justice that says sometimes, unfortunately, even seemingly unlawful things may have to occur in order to save the tribe. It is the justice of the clan and the tribe, not necessarily the individual. My husband came in while I was doing this reading, interestingly enough. He looked at the cards and the runes, and he said, "I see a crisis coming, probably political, and it will likely result in great changes in the legal or political situation of the U.S. or another large country." He then said, "It could be anything from a mass movement via democracy to throw the bums out and vote in new ones, to a total military takeover and complete change." I think he's very correct, and that the King of Wands energy and the Now-Thieves desperation energy are likely to unite to give birth to a whole lot of upheaval in a whole lot of places, where people weigh their existing situations in the balance and start looking towards ideas and people who promise to bring real changes and not just slogans. See, we had an echo of this. Karmic things or cycles, when they tend to bubble up, they take a while. And I think, we saw this beginning with the whole change we can believe in, which of course turned into be change that didn't really happen the way it was expected. But real change, on the other hand, is, I think, going to be really in the focus, and the time is now coming when that energy is actually at its peak rather than just kind of at its beginning. In some places, we can actually see this result in military takeovers or coups, or at least the domination of one or more charismatic individuals in those places who seem to have solutions, like I said. They may be given extra powers, either by law or by consent or just by takeover, to make changes in the existing legal and national systems of their particular nation or area of the world. I don't think this is a one-nation issue again. I think it's a worldwide trend, sort of like Europe between the two world wars. Well, I can't be certain. I think the birth card suggests to me that this is only the start of this trend. It's very likely to play out into 2015 as well. We can tell that when we look next year or when we look further into this year, but I think that, looking out much further than that, it gets really complicated. You can do it, but in general, I have found that the closer in you look with cards and runes, the more likely you are to get a reliable answer. Again, because I think people make choices, and those choices change things. But to sum up, the whole international scale of this reading looks like this. This is how I really sum up this year. This is likely to be the year of judgment, changes, cycles, and karma. It's also the year of the fire elemental, especially in natural disasters or influences of fire. The year of the strong man or individual in politics and or leadership. And finally, this is the year of great desperation that brings about changes. Now, for individuals, this means that this year is likely to be a year when choices made in previous times finally get around to catching up with us. Now, this can be a very good thing when in the past you've made positive changes, perhaps taken on new goals or ideas that now become reality and really start manifesting in a very good way. But they can also be somewhat painful if it's the results of some bad choices, we all make them, that come back and whack us across the side of the head. However, that still can be very healing, because once we get over that, the result can be peace, union, and the birth of new good things, new cycles, that otherwise just might take place if the old stuff didn't finally get washed out and washed over. So you can kind of think of it like a mill wheel going around. A lot of Wheel of Fortune cards have that, where, it's taking up the water, dumping it out, taking up new water, and the cycle continues. In general, I actually think this year is going to be a lot better for a lot of individual people. I just have that gut sense. Though the need rune suggests that for many people, the economic privations and upheavals of the last few years are not going to be totally over. I can't promise that, but it's not really quite happy days are here again. But it does have this sense of expectation of improvement. Still, there's a lot of good, solid energy there to help individuals and families cope with the stresses that are there. They can cope better, is one thing. The one theme to try to avoid when doing this is to set your hopes, or all your hopes, on one big thing, or one big person, or one big idea, or one big job that may actually seem like a solution at the time, because in totality it probably isn't. It may very well be part of a solution, but it isn't the answer to everything. There is no 42 in this. And there's going to be a lot of pressure towards wanting it to just be all over with and find that one person idea, one size fits all solution that will just make everything stop and it will all get better. In other words, it's going to be, if you've read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, everyone is going to be looking for 42 on some level, and we need to recognize that and just sort of try to cope with it, acknowledge it, and let it pass by, and tell it that, well, that's very nice, but, it's a part of the solution, but not the entire thing. In reality, the way peace and rebirth is going to happen is going to be different for each individual and their personal circumstances. There is just a ton of judgments, karma, destiny, and energies floating all around this year, and you want to be careful, therefore, not to jump to your personal judgments too quickly. Rather, take your time, let your destiny unfold as it will as the cycle starts to turn. Don't be the mouse that doesn't look. Keep your eye and be watchful. Run if you need to, but also don't just take off in a panic. Which is not to say everyone should just sit around and feel trapped by all the need and desperation and do nothing either. Like I said, you don't want to sit there and be the mouse forever, but rather look carefully and examine all your options before taking serious risks that might make things work. They might make them better. If you thought about it, done with the right forethought and patience, it's very likely that good, peaceful, and positive judgments, and maybe even some karmic actions, some good ones, will take place. The good news for individuals is that we can look at these cards and energies, and knowing what some of the possible pitfalls are, especially the tomcats, choose to try and make choices that avoid or at least mitigate those energies. All in all, I think that for a lot of people on the ground, this may be a better, or at least a decisive year when they feel like their wheels are finally starting to move forward again. The world itself, it's also a decision point, but it remains to be seen how that wheel will turn. Later in the year, probably around July, I'll try for a follow-up to look up and see if these major patterns have shifted. Sometimes they do about 6 months in, or if the common energy themes seem to be staying the same. I'll also look at particular issues in shorter readings, especially as hopefully I move into having more interviews, some of which may or may not take up the whole show, in which case I can throw in a small reading, or perhaps do another show where we look at certain issues. So if you have any questions on current event topics you'd like me to look at, just contact me via my website, and I'll put it on a list of topics for consideration. For now, I want to thank all my listeners at the Time Monk Radio Network, Heathen Radio Network, UK Pagan Network, the Archives, all of you for helping make 2013 a wonderful and exciting first year of this show. I look forward to seeing you all in 2014, but for now, I want to wish all my listeners a Happy New Year, and I'll see you again next time on Cat's Eye on the Future.
But here's a health to the company, and one to my lass.
You have been listening to Cat's Eye on the Future, the show where we take a glimpse of the energies coming soon into your world and into your future. Be sure to join us again next time when we explore another chapter of Cat's Eye on the Future.
Again. But here's a health to the company, and one to my lass. Let us drink and be merry, all out of one glass. Let us drink